Hey y'all, and welcome back to a new video. Today we're going to be looking at a chess game that I played recently in my most recent tournament, where I was actually able to play someone incredibly high rated. My opponent is over 500 points higher rated than me, one of the highest rated people I've ever played, and it really is like an opportunity to play someone, well, this high. So let's get into the chess. I start off the game with the move d4, and my opponent goes with the move knight to f6, one of the most common options against d4, and I decide to play the move that I most normally play. I play the move bishop to g5, which is the Trzymkowski attack. And if you've been like keeping up with this, you might know that I played this opening in round 2, and my opponent went d5, which happens in this game. And in that game that I played over there, I decided to play the move bishop takes f6, e takes f6, and we got into a very combative game with e3, c4, which I ended up drawing. But in this game, I decided that, okay, here my opponent is probably a lot better than me at chess. He knows what he's doing. So what is the best way for me to give myself like chances of winning the game, or at least drawing the game? I thought, okay, what I would need to do is I need to make the game tactical, because that gives me a chance. If I make the game very tactical, then my opponent might mess up, I might get lucky, and I might win the game. So okay, I decided to play the move knight to d2, which I also know it's a different line, and it's one that's very very combative, very aggressive, as my opponent immediately plays into the same idea with the move c5, e3, and knight to c6, going after my pawn on d4 and trying to say that white has some issues. Here I have to play the move c3, defending the pawn like this. Of course, I can also play knight f3 or something, defending it like this, but I think c3 is much more reasonable. My opponent goes e6, opening up a pin over here, so now this is a real thing, and he's probably going to play something like bishop to e7, and I don't even know. But if you're looking at this position, you might notice something very interesting. My opponent is already down a full 17 minutes on the clock, while I'm only down 4. So the opening's already a success. Life is good, but we still have to play chess. Knight g to f3 makes a lot of sense. Just putting knight into the center, controlling the center squares, making sure everything is logical. This is the next move. Maybe I play queen b3 at some point. Of course, we're not going to play these moves together since c5 is always an issue. But we're going to be doing well, and it's just going to be an equal position. My opponent decides to play the move h6, which makes sense, and I played the move bishop to h4, and my opponent thought here for a good bit before playing this very interesting move, pawn to g5. And this move kind of shocked me, because pawn to g5 I thought was impossible in this position. And in reality it pretty much is, because this move g5, it really destabilizes the king side, the black's king side, and allows for white to make some sort of attacking moves against it. Like after the move bishop to g3, I have ideas of playing the move h4, knight e5, f4. I'm going to go after this pawn. It's going to be a weakness. Then my rooks are going to get it, and my opponent's king is going to be unsafe, since you already pushed the pawns over here and you can't castle on this side of the board. So I'm like, okay, well then if you go for this, it doesn't make any sense. You probably shouldn't be able to play g5. It's not a move that really looks possible. But alas, he plays the move g5, and after bishop to g3, he goes for the idea of knight h5. Obviously, this is what he wanted. My bishop is technically trapped in this position, and he's going to be able to pick it off for the knight, which, as we all know, is normally good, but actually this position is nearly winning for white. Nearly winning. If my opponent does something wrong here, or if I do something right, then I'm just gonna be much better, because like clear off some pieces, clear off like this knight, clear out these 4 pieces, for example, we would get a position that looks a lot like, I don't know, very. Let's see. Okay, how do I clear off the pieces correctly? How about here takes here sorry. Let's say bishop here takes. Like for example, in this position, this position, I would evaluate, not here, actually, because he has some ideas in the center, but let's say, very, very awkward here, because my opponent always has this, but for example, if you believe that he doesn't have that move, then what white is going to do is white is going to basically just start with h4, open up this side of the board. I'm going to get knight f3 in over here. I get all my pieces onto this side of the board. This king is looking very, very weak, and in reality, I kind of like my position, except for the fact that black SC takes d4, and this is a huge problem, but just imagine that he doesn't have that move. I know it's impossible to imagine things, but, you know, yeah, if he doesn't have that move, I'm probably just much better. So instead, in this position, I decide, okay, I want to trade off some pieces. I want to get something going here. I think for a while, and I play this very interesting move, knight to e5. And the point is, yeah, I spent like 10 minutes on the move. And the point is that now my opponent has to take on g3 since I'm threatening this knight. If my opponent takes on e5, I'm going to basically just take the knight on h5. I'm going to target his king. My bishop is here. My opponent probably has to go back to c6. I already had this line in for a second here, and then I don't know, I'm going to put some pressure, maybe bishop to b5, maybe I'm going to play this move h4 immediately, just start ripping stuff open. Life is good for me. It's plus 1.7, and I'm looking at this and I'm going, okay, well, I'm probably just going to win the game. Because my opponent in this position is so behind in development. As you can see, he has one piece out. This bishop really sucks because I have a lot of pawns on dark squares, and you can't really target anything, so there's not really a space for him to go. This bishop isn't going anywhere because he has a lot of pawns on light squares, and that's really blunting his bishop. And my knight's going to be great. My knight's going to jump into the position with a move like knight to f3. Maybe I'll play an e4 at some point. Not right now, obviously, since the pawn. But like knight f3, I'm going to get in here. This bishop is going to come alive very easily since I have a lot of open light squares to get into the position of my opponent. Isn't really guarding his light squares all that well. Like, I'm going to play bishop d3. I'm probably going to like sacrifice it on g6 or something. And black's just going to be a lot worse. So he can't take on e5. And I know what he's going to play. I know he's going to play this move, knight takes g3. And I'm going to play this move, h takes g3. And after knight e5, pawn e5, I'm going to get this pawn structure that I genuinely kind of enjoy with this move f4 coming here, king to f2, queen to b3, maybe queen to c2 at some point. And I'm enjoying this because basically I'm playing against his dark squared bishop, which is what you do in these Strempowskis. You lose your dark squared bishop for a knight, but then you put all your pawns in dark squares, your light squared bishop thrives, and you play a position like this with f4 and king f2. So I'm like, okay, this is great. This is exactly what I wanted from the opening. Let's go for it. However, this position is already very bad for me. I completely misevaluated, and I'm already a lot worse. My opponent kind of outplayed me there with this whole idea of g5 and knight h4. The correct move here is bishop to e5. And the point is, if my opponent takes, I thought about taking with the d pawn actually, but taking with the knight is better. After knight to f6, I just play h4. And the attack is really, really strong. My opponent probably has to take or something. And I don't even have to take immediately. I can play queen f3. Yeah, it's very interesting. It's a very interesting line. But I was a little bit worried here that after a move like f6, bishop back to g3, knight takes g3 here, and like h5, I wasn't like sure if this position is what I should be going for. Because like if I play a move like bishop d3, I thought maybe king f7, he stops the pawn. And you know, like these are kind of worrying in some lines, maybe. I'm not too sure. The computer just thinks they're weaknesses, but I don't know. It's difficult. It's difficult to evaluate this over the board. But instead, the line that we went for leaves me in a worse position. And if my opponent were to play the move bishop to d7, which didn't happen in the game, but is one of the moves, then black is just already in the driver's seat, and black is already doing quite well, because looking at the position like this, I don't really see white's plan. Obviously, I'm going to play a move like f4. My opponent isn't really going to capture. He's just going to wait till I capture. Not really going to capture. And my opponent has very simple play. My opponent's going to play queen c7, king f2. I don't know, maybe king f2 is wrong. Like, what do I play here? Knight f3, I guess. Yeah, and it's difficult for white to play. That's my point, right? Like, every move isn't like the most reasonable, while black has these amazing bishops that can get into the game pretty easily, and already has like some ideas of playing like b5, a5, going for a queenside attack, where white's kingside ideas have kind of been thwarted. So that's what he should have done, but instead he plays this very, very interesting move that I don't really understand. He plays the move bishop to g7 after some thought, and allows me back into the game. And if I'm being honest, bishop to g7 doesn't make any sense to me. The point is, I think that the point of this move is that I think eventually what he wants to do is after f4, he wants to play this move d5, and he thinks that his bishop might open up that way. Or maybe f4, he might play something like f6 in the future, open his bishop up that way, takes. But still, I don't really get it, because these pawns do a good job about blunting the bishop. Maybe he also wants this move thrown in the mix, but then there's knight to e5, knight to e4 ideas, going after some bishop on f6. You would have to waste a tempi. And then my pieces kind of start getting alive, because there's like ways for my pieces to get out like this after his king, but it's still not being castled. And I just don't really get it. If he's gonna castle this way and he wants the bishop there, I don't understand that either, because he shouldn't be castling that way into this open file where he can't even like blunt my rook at all. And then I'm gonna get my bishop here, my queen's gonna get in, my knight's probably gonna like sacrifice on g5, and I'm just probably winning. So I didn't really understand this move, and I simply quickly played the move f4, because it's my plan, right? It's what I want to do. Let's follow up on what we wanted to do. It's not the best move, but it's fine. My opponent plays queen to b6, going after my pawn here, maybe trying to prepare this from an alternate standpoint, maybe trying to go for this, going after this pawn. Very interesting move. I decide not to trade queens. I played the move queen to c2, actually knowing that probably the computer wants me to trade queens, because in some positions with the queen trade, we could get into an endgame, and I don't really want an endgame right now. I'd rather have a middle game against my opponent, since I know middle games more. Like, my opponent can probably play the move c4, queen b6 here, and I was a little bit worried about this position, because his rook is open, he has ideas of this, and I've lost a couple positions like this. I've lost a couple, I think a notable one I lost to, what's his name? I think he's another Eric, like Eric Alexander or something. I lost a game like that, and I've always had like a bad taste in my mouth when a position gets like this, because of, I think, that game. But anyway, that's all to say that I played queen to c2. My opponent plays the move c4 after a long think. Not a long think, actually. No, he spent, I guess, like very little time on this move. And his main idea with c4, his main idea with this whole plan, actually, I think, was that after king to f2, which is clearly the best move, defending the pawn, really the only way to defend the pawn. I don't think there's another way to defend the pawn. I have to play king to f2. If I play king to e2 right now, you might think this also does the trick, but this blocks in my bishop like permanently, and we don't want to do that. So king to f2 is played. And my opponent shows his idea here with the move h5. And the point of this move h5, you might say immediately, okay, but after knight f3, isn't this pawn just like dying here? And like, you're never going to take this, because this is just an improvement to white structure, and then this pawn is just isolated forever. So what is this move h5? What is he doing? Is he trying to lose or something? Like, what an idiot, right? But actually, there's a very, very interesting idea, because after knight f3, my opponent's idea is to play this move h4. Very, very interesting. h4. And I can't exactly take this pawn. There's a reason why I can't take this pawn. Yes, I can't take this pawn with the pawn, because he's going to take on f4 now, and he's going to come in here because of this pin. So it's actually a very, very clever plan. It's a very, very clever plan with this h5, h4 nonsense. And a plan that really I didn't see at all. A plan that I really didn't see at all. I just thought, okay, well, this is a bad move because of knight f3, and I'm going to target the pawn, and life is good. And then he plays h4, and I start to stress. because h4 is a huge question to the white position. He's knocking on the door. Again, I can't take, if we put this up closer, I can't take because of g takes f4 with this pin on the king, and this is a problem. And really, I don't have many other moves because my opponent is simply threatening to take this pawn. That's what he's threatening to do. He's trying to take this pawn. I can't move this pawn at all because, again, g takes f4. So if I allow him to take here, king takes, opens up an attack on the rook. I lose the game, of course. So I can't do that. I can't do any of that. So am I just worse? Am I just losing? Well, no. Actually, white is much better here. Because at the end of the day, my opponent actually weakened his pawns a lot by doing this. He weakened his pawns really badly by doing this. And with one very simple move, my opponent is threatening g3 with check, right? So why don't I just move my king? King to e2. Now there's no more check. And if you take on g3, like what happened in the game, I'm going to trade the rooks. I'm going to get this pawn. This pawn is a forever weakness, and life is good. And if he doesn't do that, I'm not really sure what he's supposed to do. Like if you take on f4, I'm just going to recapture on f4. This pawn still completely blunts the... I can't draw arrows. This pawn still completely blunts the bishop. My knight might be coming here in some lines. This pawn is just lost. Like I'm just going to win this pawn. Somehow this is like the top engine line. G takes f4. But I mean, how can it be? Because I'm just going to win a pawn. White's just going to win a pawn. White's going to win the game. White's much better here. Plus, not to mention that this move c5 also technically weakened this whole pawn chain here. I'm going to play a move like b3. Try to like remove some of the stability of his pawns. I'm going to get my light squared bishop out. Life is good. I'm just going to put my king back on f2. And actually, white is significantly better in this position. White is significantly better, although I am down 500 points of rating, which is crazy. But anyway, my opponent here thinks for a while and ends up playing the move h takes g3. But after rook takes h8, bishop takes h8, knight takes g5, I can't take with the pawn. I'm sure this is like pretty obvious, but this is a terrible pawn structure. We don't want to do this. Knight takes g5 is of course the right move, and it gets closer to the game, into the game, attacking the king and stuff. We look at this position after knight takes g5, and we see that this pawn is a huge liability. He's going to lose this eventually. Like, I don't have to go after this right away. Of course, I can't walk over here now because of the pawn on e3. But eventually that pawn's just going to be lost. And then, after that pawn is lost, my queen's going to come in here. Maybe before that pawn is lost, my queen is going to come in here. We're going to go after the king, and white is going to win. Not to mention, I have ideas of b3, trying to open up my light squared bishop. My rook can get behind the pawn, go after the queen that he's like kind of lazily placed on b6. Now it's a terrible piece. Now it's a horrible placement of the queen on b6. So what does he do? What can he do? What can he do in this position? He finds a move. He finds an idea of something to play. He plays the move bishop to d7. Technically a mistake. I wouldn't really call it a mistake. This position is already very hard to play for my opponent. And I think for a little bit, I decided, okay, a move that's always going to be good for me. I'm always going to be happy with this move. I'm going to play the move king to f3. I know it's probably not the best move. There are probably other moves that can be quicker, be faster, that the engine likes more. But king to f3 I thought made a lot of sense. I'm touching the pawn, first of all. Touching the pawn. Sounds a little bit wrong, but I'm touching the pawn. And at the end of the day, now I'm not too worried about the b2 pawn, because the b2 pawn was about to be taken with a check. After I move my queen over here, probably to h7, which seems like the most logical square for my queen, and I would lose the rook. So after this move king to f3, if I move here in some like theoretical line, if white gets an extra move, like for example, queen to h7, queen takes b2, I have this move rook to b1, defended by the queen from over here, and after queen to f7, I'm always running my king up to f6, to g4. I don't even know how I got f6 from that. To g4, this pawn is weak, my opponent's king is getting hunted, and white is winning. So I was like, okay, king to f3. Makes a lot of sense. Actually, the computer wanted something a little bit crazier even. It just wanted to move rook to b1, which is very, very nice. The point is, it does the same thing as king to f3. It allows this idea of queen to h7. But now I'm able to play this move b3 as well and open up the position like this. So my opponent has 2 threats to deal with instead of 1. But okay, king to f3 on the board. My opponent goes with the move long castles, which makes a lot of sense. By the way, this is my opponent's last chance. My opponent has to find this insane move f5, which doesn't even make any sense to me. The point is, after e takes f5, you can't, e takes f6, you can't take here because of queen to g6. I'm going to be picking up the dark square bishop. But he's just going to go long castles. He's going to give me this pawn here. Like, I can play f7. My opponent can play, like, e5 or something. Sorry, that is d4. No, the computer says e5. Trying to open up some pieces and stuff. But, like, actually looking at this position, like, finding this move f5 and just, oh, okay, well, now I get compensation for the pawn. I know you have a pawn 1 square away from queening, but I get compensation. It doesn't really make any sense. Not to mention the fact that I don't have to take it. Like, I can just play, like, rook b1 or something. And I'm just arguing, okay, this pawn is going to be lost. I'm going to be up a pawn in the endgame. Life is good. Sorry. I said rook b1 was okay. No, I guess b3 is what has to be played. I don't know. In any case, yeah, my opponent doesn't find that. Instead thinks for a while and plays the move long castles, which is another way of sacrificing the pawn. But this way he thinks is reasonable because he thinks that he's going to have some play after my king, after his rook comes over here. And he thinks that his pawn is more of a liability than anything. So, okay, reasonable idea. I take it. I spend a lot of time on this move, trying to figure out if it's okay. But I do, in fact, take the pawn. And after rook to f8, I have to spend a lot of time again trying to figure out the position, because if I don't play this one move, then then I'm probably just not going to do well. I have to move my queen out of the way. I have to get my queen in there. If I play a move like queen to g6, which is lazy, my opponent takes here, rook to b1, king f7 here, and you see my queen is in the line of fire. There might be some tactics. I don't even know. It's worrying. It's worrying, really. And I didn't want to get involved with all that. So instead I go for the most active move. The only move in the position. The only move that wins. Actually, the only move that is even better for white. Actually, everything is worse. Everything is better for black if I don't do this. I have to play the move queen to h7. And the dark squared bishop is trapped in the corner. He's not allowed to go here. He can't go here since the queen just takes. And my knight is going to be capturing on h8. And white is winning. And after the move queen takes b2, and I was calculating this for a while, queen takes b2, didn't happen in the game. I go rook b1, queen to f2, and king to g4, and white's king is safe. White's king is safe in the position. After queen takes e3, I just simply play this. And this is the difference. This is the difference because my queen is on the h7 line. He can't go here, obviously. He can't go here because of this, and actually something crazy. Rook, nope. Rook d7, sorry. For some reason I thought that was okay. I don't think I would have played that in the game. In analysis, I thought that move might be okay. It's not. It is not okay. I actually, in fact, lose because of queen takes takes a7 if I play that move. But yeah, just rook takes d7, and my king hides. And it's GG. Because he's getting mated. And if he goes the other way, actually he can't go the other way. Just can't go the other way. So that's cool. That's pretty cool. Instead of like trying to like be desperate and take on b2, which I genuinely think is probably the best thing that he can do because he's losing the bishop anyway. That's probably the best thing he can do because I don't know, maybe he gets mated. I kind of want to see this line again. Sorry. Here, queen f2, king g4. What do you play here? How is this like reasonable for black? How is this +3? It says just that doesn't make any sense. He says b6, knight takes h8, like, but this wasn't a thing. Queen takes e3. I just play knight g6. I defend the pawn. I don't understand like why this is like shown as a valid option. No, those are just completely lost. Okay. Yeah, you can't play like this actually. So instead of through queen to h7, my opponent tries. He plays the move bishop to c6. As you can see by the arrows, there are lines after my king. My opponent is saying that after knight takes h8, I'm going to have some problems with this move. My king is going to get hunted out, and there might be some serious issues in the position. For example, something that I calculated after knight takes h8, this move, king here, my opponent takes here, and I'm going to lose the rook with check. I'm going to lose everything, and I lose, which is kind of funny. Also, by the way, knight takes h8 here, and I take this pawn. My opponent can play this move d3, opening up this. If I play king to f2, the rook skewers down here. His rook can take this pawn, as then my pawn over here is being pinned to my king. My king goes to g1, check. King to h1, and I maybe am safe. I maybe safe, but my opponent has a pawn 2 squares away from queening, and it's very dangerous. And I don't like that line. So after the move knight takes h8, which is one of the best moves. Also, there's this idea here. I wasn't too sure about this. I didn't think this was accurate. And the point is that like after king b8 or something, I thought of maybe like, sorry, not king 2. Queen e7, I guess is what the computer says. I don't even know actually. Okay, whatever. It doesn't really matter. I just thought that might be like a bailout move in some case if knight takes h8 doesn't work. But bishop takes c6, and I calculate, and I find that after knight takes h8, which I play in the game after, like 5 minutes of thought, my opponent plays the move d4, and instead of going for king takes g3, and this whole line, king takes g3, d3, like king here. No, I lose. Wait, what am I talking about? Queen takes b2. What am I talking about? Okay. No, knight g6 here. Yeah, and this is okay. This is technically okay. Okay, yeah. Instead of going for this line with king takes g3, after knight takes h8, d4, I play king to g4. And my king hides out like far away from his pawns, far away from the safety of the pawns. But I'm completely fine, and white is winning, and there's actually not much black can do at this point. My opponent decides, okay, this is probably the best thing to do. He plays the move d3. Of course, it makes a lot of sense. He's barring my bishop. He's blocking my queen from coming back here. And he's going after my pawn on e3, which, yeah, very logical move. I simply played the move knight back to g6, bringing my knight back into the game, having an attack on the rook, and going for some like checking ideas to trade off this light squared bishop, which I think is actually a huge problem since it's stopping me from coming to the e4 square, to the f3 square, to the squares that I want to be on with my pieces. My opponent here plays the move rook to d8. I take a bit of time, but I'm like, okay, the less pieces on the board, the less he can do. I play knight to e7, king to b8, and knight takes c6. And I think here my opponent should have taken with the queen, actually, not going after this pawn, and instead saying, well, now your light squares are a little bit off, your king is still stuck here. It's a bit tricky of a position, but actually king to g3, and I'm able to hide. Instead he takes with the b pawn. This immediately opens up another idea for me. I have to get my light square bishop out. What is the best way to do that? My light square bishop is very much hemmed in here. How do I get my light square bishop out? A little bit of a pop quiz here. Not the hardest move to find. You have to play the move pawn to b3, and the point is that after this pawn moves, I'm going to bring my light square bishop out, and then there's going to be some attacks on the king. And if you don't do that, if you don't take the pawn, I'm going to take here. I'm going to bring my rook here, and with my queen here and my rook on this file, I'm going to be trying to win the game. My opponent decides after a long while to eventually capture on b3. I don't really think he had much of a choice, because if he doesn't do that, I'm just going to take him. I take the pawn on d3. My opponent plays pawn to b2. I play rook to b1. And as you can see, the game is quickly going in my direction, as my opponent has 11 minutes on the clock versus my 27. My opponent goes king to a8. I decide very reasonably, okay, I don't want any funny business. I'm just going to play the move king to f3. back, defending the pawn, still not capturing the pawn over here. There's weakness. Eventually it will be captured. Does not need to be captured right now. King to f3 defends the pawn. I have this interesting idea, and one of my ideas is that I want to go king here, queen e4, king here, and like eventually like bring my rook out like this. And so then I can move my bishop without letting this rook get in, which is kind of like a very ambitious idea, very ambitious idea. But I thought, okay, maybe I can do that if my opponent really doesn't have anything. But actually, the game is much easier to finish. My opponent goes rook to b8. I play bishop to e4, going after this pawn, saying that my opponent's king is weak on the queen side of the board. My opponent goes back to d8. Yeah, my opponent goes back to d8. And I simply play the move queen to e7. Going after the rook. I'm currently threatening this move bishop. Sorry. No, I'm not. I'm just threatening the pawn and going after this pawn. And I'm targeting the rook at some lines. I'm actually threatening the move rook to b2. That's what I'm threatening. The point is, after the queen takes, I will be capturing the rook. And I will be winning the game. My opponent here plays rook d2. Maybe he has some chances on my king. He defends the pawn. I think for a little bit, I have this idea to simplify. I can go queen here, king b7, sack the queen here, and play this position for a win. It should be winning here. But I decided, why do I have to do that? I can just pick up another pawn, and I can do that on the next move. My opponent goes king to b7. Now I play queen takes c6. Queen takes c6, bishop takes c6 here, and I am up 4 pawns in the endgame as the g3 pawn finally falls to my king. King to d5. My opponent decides to play on here. Okay, it's his right. He can do that. A little annoying, but it's fine. He can do it if he wants. I play the move c4. My opponent can't take because after here, the rook has to go back. And after that, I will be taking on b2, and then I will just be up 3 pawns. My opponent will have no source of counterplay. So my opponent can't take. Instead, goes back to e6. I play king to f3, trying to get my pawns forward. My opponent goes a5, a little bit of a trick. If I allow this pawn all the way back down to a6, to a3, then there's going to be issues with rook c7, rook c8, rook c2, rook c1. So I can't allow that. I play the move a3, a4, g4, rook c2. I play king to e4. This pawn is uncapturable, even though it's with check, because after king d3, he's going to be losing the pawn on b2, and I will be winning the game. So my opponent goes rook to d2. I'll allow my king across the center line. f5, king e7, g5, king f5, g6, king g7, and then I start pushing my c pawn. And the reason why I'm doing this is because only the rook can defend the c pawn. He goes to c2. I keep pushing. If he ever takes, he loses the b2 pawn. King f8, king c7, king e7. This is an interesting stalemate trick, but it simply doesn't work because after this move, yes, the king is stalemated, but he has no way of sacrificing the rook properly. So he just takes. Rook takes b2, and in a couple moves, my opponent resigns. After rook b4, rook a7, f6, king e6, rook b6, king d7, and g7, my opponent resigns the game, and I beat a 22-56. Someone over 500 points higher rated than me in a classical game, which is insane. That's the highest rated player I've ever played, let alone beaten. And yeah, I'm very happy. Round 5, I'm playing against another 2250. Maybe I'll win that game too. You never know. And yeah, that's all it is for today. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys found this entertaining, instructive, all of the above. If you did, remember to like, subscribe to learn what the YouTubers tell you to do. And yeah, that's it. Good evening and good night.